You're listening to Open Mic on WJR, and some of you listening may have been fortunate enough to play college athletics. For the rest of us, we reached the athletic prowess at the end of high school. But I remember growing up, for the most part, the strength and conditioning aspect of it, or weightlifting, or taking care of our bodies, getting bigger, stronger, faster, all that was really incumbent upon the individual himself or herself. And nowadays, if you're a college athlete, there's a little more accountability, a little more responsibility. Gabe Loper, junior at Wayne State University in the Sportscaster program. Gabe, good to have you on.
Glad to be back.
I know you take care of your body well, and it looks like it anyway. So you had a chance to talk with the strength and conditioning coach, one of the coaches there at Wayne State University, Justin Kelly. And I've had a chance to know different, strength and conditioning coaches at the professional level. And it's fascinating to me. It's a fascinating world. And especially, if you're specific to one sport is one thing, but for somebody who's in the strength and conditioning program at the collegiate level, like Justin Kelly, you've got to be well-versed in a lot of sports and what works and what doesn't, right?
Oh yeah, and it's one of those things where the idea of being sport specific, because so many different sports require different levels of training, different different requirements. But even then, it goes one of the things I learned over the course of the interview is it goes so much further than just you know are you in the gym so many days a week. It's the nutritional app, the nutrition side of it, the sleep side of it. And there's so many different aspects that go into performing at a high level, the behind the scenes. And it goes for D1 athletes, D2 athletes, and D3 athletes as well. So I thought this was one of those cool opportunities where you kind of get to see that behind the scenes aspect of athletes, and kind of what they're doing. And especially for Mr. Kelly, and seeing what he does, and how he's helping to elevate these athletes and get them to the next level.
How important do you think it is to have a strong relationship between a coach, especially a strength coach, and the individual athlete, and not just having a program that says, hey, one size fits all?
Oh, it's crucial. It's crucial. The personal aspect is so important. It's so key because every athlete is different. They're not one size fits all. I remember a little bit of that. Just being an athlete in high school, and the same things that work for somebody don't always work for everybody. So the personal aspect of that, because different people have to eat so many things or so many calories per day, and different people require different amounts of sleep in order to, incur different amounts of muscle growth and whatever. And so that kind of personality, that connection that a strength coach can have with an athlete it becomes the training. I guess the process becomes a lot more personable to the athlete, and it allows them to perform at such a higher level as opposed to a one size fits all, because it's directed toward that single athlete in that single sport. And it allows athletes, especially today compared to whenever, at different levels, lower levels, it allows them to perform that much better.
Yeah, no, that's well said. If I go back to my high school years, I just remember my coach saying, Kane, get in the weight room.
I remember that as well. I didn't always do it, but I wish I
Exactly.
did. But
Exactly.
man.
All right, here's Gabe Loper with Wayne State strength and conditioning coach Justin Kelly.
To start off, just talk a little bit about your role as a strength and conditioning coach, and then how it fits into the bigger picture of developing student athletes here at Wayne State.
Yeah, so I work with 5 different teams directly. So I do all the programming and training for women's volleyball, men's, women's basketball, and then baseball as well. And then I also assist with football. And then I also head up our graduate assistantship and internship program as well. So that role kind of be trying to just develop future aspiring strength coaches to, eventually come to the next level, either as a full-time in college or whether that be private sector, high school, whatever that may be. But yeah, like a typical day, it could kind of varies throughout the season depending on who's in season. Fortunately for me, I have teams every season, so I get to stay busy and get to kind of be in on the action all the time. So obviously, women's volleyball is a fall sport, men's and women's basketball being a winter sport, baseball being a spring sport. So I'm kind of kind of get to train teams pretty much differently all year round. But usually a typical day, we get there about 5:30 in the morning, and then depending on when our last team is, for me, I have volleyball all the way at 4 o'clock most days, so I'll be there pretty much 5:30 to 5 p.m. So um, long days, but we get some downtime, obviously, to like work out and work on our computers and stuff between teams and program and all that stuff. But yeah, we definitely stay busy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now you were a baseball player here at Wayne State as well. So kind of talk about your transition from being an athlete, and then that transition to turning into a strength coach, and kind of what you learned there and how that ended up carrying you forward.
Yeah, so I definitely think being in our profession, either whether that be a strength coach or even just a sport coach, um, at this level, I think it definitely helps to have gone through what the athletes go through today at some point in our past. Um, so we're always trying to look for strength coaches that kind of have that student athlete background to understand like what we're putting our student athletes for. I actually had a business management undergrad, and the biggest thing I took away from that is, don't ask your subordinates to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. So, again, if we're treating our athletes like that, in the workplace, we wouldn't ask our student athletes to do anything that we haven't done or wouldn't do ourselves. So, definitely, and then also just like knowing the grind and knowing what it takes to you know, go to class all morning and then have to come to lift, have to come to practice. I think having that background definitely helped. And kind of what got me into strength conditioning is just knowing just seeing the results that it had for myself. I came in kind of a scrawny little high schooler, and I definitely needed to gain some muscle, gain some weight. So I definitely needed to up what I was eating, and also in the weight room as well, just what I was doing. And I definitely saw the positive impact that the weight room had on my personal career as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I imagine, I mean, your job changes a lot based on the many sports that you work with. So how has your approach to training evolved over the years, especially with, I mean, new science and technology that you guys can use, and the different even just like equipment and everything else. How is that? How have you found that immersed with what you do and how you find yourself training these athletes?
Yeah, so like you said, we're always trying to, add technology to our weight room, add different apparatuses, whether that be like physical pieces of equipment or even just like technology. Like right now, we're actually working on trying to get all of our programming instead of because we still do it kind of the old-fashioned way where we print off a sheet. Everybody has a sheet, and it's a sheet of paper that you take to your rack, clip it on the rack, and train off. We're actually working on something to try to get more like everybody's going to have the workouts on their phones. Everyone's going to be able to like it's a more interactive student athlete experience. But as far as the like equipment goes, as far as like technology, we're always trying to add stuff, to measure bar speed, measure internal load. We've run heart rate monitors on our football players before. We've had positive experiences with that. Just kind of just like it's just like wearing an Apple Watch now, but we kind of started that before Apple Watches were so mainstream. But just hooking up a heart rate monitor, seeing how many calories they burn throughout a workout, seeing what their max heart rate gets to, and kind of like how much stress they're putting on that heart. Obviously, with like all the injuries and stuff, heart related injuries in sports that have kind of been coming up more often. We always think it's good to kind of monitor that the best we can. And then as far as like the programming aspect of it, there's always that stuff to like measure bar speed, measure force into the ground. At the end of the day, we also think basic programming works. Just like putting effort in and doing the basic lifts. Obviously, different sports have different demands, so we kind of program it that way. But for the majority of our programming, I would say throughout our entire department, not just me, Coach Mendoza and our two grad assistants, to Megan and Max. We're always trying to keep it as basic as possible, and then maybe 75% basic movements, squat, jumping, pressing, pulling, and then maybe that like 25% is a little more sports specific, a little more niche, like towards their sport. So we always think just like basic programming is going to get our athletes strong if they put the work in.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. That's no, like I said, I mean that's great insight and everything else. And it's always cool to see the way that technology, even with obviously the adaptation of AI and everything else is coming into play with sports. So more like the physical side, when you're working with athletes, what physical qualities do you think are absolutely essential for them to be able to compete at a high level in Division II, Division I college? And is height and weight like true like the deal breakers, or is that just a myth?
We always kind of go back and forth on this. It always when we look at Division I teams, even just recent memory watching March Madness, all those men's basketball players are all pushing 7 feet. Even the guards are 6'6". At Wayne State, our guards are like under 6 feet. So that's definitely a recruiting aspect of it. But in our position, we're kind of dealt the athletes, dealt the cards that we're given. Um, but again, it kind of goes back to hard work. I always kind of live by the quote: "Hard work beats talent if talent doesn't work hard." And that's usually the teams that we coach. If the best players are the hardest workers, those teams are usually going to be pretty successful. So, yeah, the size obviously, that's usually what gets the NIL money and gets drafted in the first round. But it's sounds cliche, but nothing beats like good old fashioned hard work. Getting your elbow grease and getting in the weight room and getting gritty.
Yeah, for sure. And then I guess for incoming freshmen, I mean, you mentioned even like yourself, you're scrawny kid coming out of high school. What would you say is like a common mistake that freshmen make, whether it's about taking care of their bodies or physical training, that you guys see, and how do you guys kind of mold them to become the athletes that they are here at Wayne State?
Well, I could go a bunch of different directions on this. I think the biggest thing with freshmen is the communication aspect of it. Um, was obviously me being a small kid or whatever, like my personal experience, and even like freshmen that you see on TV playing, but even just like trying to like grow them into an adult. Like I'll have freshmen text me an hour before lift starts saying like, "Oh, I can't make lift today. I have class." And it's like, did your class just get scheduled this morning, or like so? I would say the communication aspect of it and trying to just like grow them into an adult and just try to just be on top of things like that. Obviously, the sport coaches are always on them, going to class, studying and making sure you're there to get a degree. And for us too, we're trying to treat them like adults, and we're trying to have them treat us the same. Like a lot of kids usually don't know how to cook right away either, so they are relying on the cafeteria or fast food or stuff like that. And then especially on our end, gains, everyone thinks like, oh, what do I need to do to lift to gain weight? But it's like you need to eat to gain weight. Like that's what it comes down to. Like you're going to get the stimulus from training and from practice. So it's up to the athletes to kind of put the right resources in their body. So I would say the communication aspect, and then I would say the nutrition as well.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. And then for athletes, non-athletes alike, what would you say is the biggest benefactor to staying fit and maintaining form outside of the weight room and training facilities?
Um, I would say just try to like do stuff that you enjoy. Like I have even like our former athletes that stay around, whether that be fall sports that graduate in the winter and they kind of stay around for the spring semester. Obviously they want to stay active and stay fit even though they're not training like student athletes anymore. And the biggest thing I tell them is do stuff that you enjoy. Like I'm sure not everybody's going to enjoy doing a split squat, doing a Bulgarian split squat, doing a hang clean, or running conditioning tests. But if I instill maybe 5 exercises in you that you enjoy doing, maybe you like squatting, maybe you like benching, maybe you like pull downs or pull ups, stuff like that. If you just kind of stick to the stuff that you like to do, and then also try not to stop, because when you take breaks, it's hard to get back into the gym. It's easier to stay on a routine and get in a schedule, like, hey, I'm going to wake up at this time and go to the gym every day. Maybe I'm not crushing legs, but maybe I'm getting on the treadmill for 30 minutes or something like that. I would say that's the biggest thing, is just do stuff that you enjoy, even if you're a non-student athlete. Just do stuff that you enjoy. Like don't make going to the gym a chore. Like enjoy what you do when you go to the gym.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. That's great, even for me, because like I said, I mean, I haven't really, been in sports since, high school. But anyway, switching gears on over to like the mental side of things. I mean, that's such a huge aspect of being able to perform at a high level as a student athlete.
Mhm.
How do you help your athletes build mental toughness in the weight room? To I guess build mental toughness, through training programs, and kind of taking care of that mental aspect as much as the physical aspect as well.
I think personally for my programming, I like in our off season to essentially just get more volume and more hypertrophy for our student athletes. I like putting in like burnout sets or plus sets where they might be at 75, 80% and have to do 5 plus, meaning like you should be able to get 5 here, but I want you to try to get a couple more reps. And then the burnout sets to you know just the off season is all about volume, kind of like repairing those muscle fibers that broke down during the season. So a good way to get that volume is to try to just do as many reps as you can. Do as many pull-ups as you can, and obviously it's a kind of like a self challenge. And a lot of times in sport and even just in life, your biggest competition is yourself. That's what's inside of you. So doing stuff that challenges yourself kind of pushes you to be uncomfortable. Obviously, not everybody's going to have a 100% success rate in every single exercise that I program. So I think just pushing the boundaries a little bit definitely tests the mental fortitude. Um, you know, Obviously coming into the weight room and seeing maybe 5 exercises you like doing, but the 3 that you don't like doing, that's gonna push you to over the hump and hopefully translate into sport as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then you mentioned like the burnout sets and everything else. So how do you know when to push an athlete versus when to pull back to prevent I guess that burnout or injury?
That's definitely one of the trickier parts of the job. Obviously, they gotta when they're in the season. Obviously, the priority should be their sport. Um, and I think if you ask a lot of sport coaches, the priority is their sport all the time. And it that sometimes makes it tricky to kind of push them for us because obviously there's certain times in the season where we would like to push them hard to obviously get their bodies prepared to play that season when it really counts. But then especially once you get into college, I think it's starting to trickle down into high school a little bit, where kids are specifying in one sport, um, where usually our better athletes are multiple sport athletes. But even in college, obviously, it's a year round job. You're training in the summer, you're training in the fall, you're doing fall ball you're doing spring ball for football, and you're having winter conditioning. It's a 4 season all year round cycle. So we try to gauge where our athletes are, even just by I think what kind of gets lost with all the like we talked about earlier, like the sciencey stuff. What gets lost is just having like good heart to heart conversations with our athletes and kind of just gauging, trying to get them to open up to us a little bit to see, hey, how'd you sleep last night? Like, what'd you do this weekend? Stuff like that, like, kind of goes a long way because we can kind of gauge. Um, where they're at, if they're feeling fatigued, if we need to pull back a little bit. I think obviously there's different science parts to measure that, like resting heart rate, different like central nervous system gauges. But I think the best way still is even just having real conversations with the athletes, and trying to get to know them and trying to get to know them on a personal level because it's tough because sometimes, especially with the transfer portal nowadays, like if you're a student athlete, you might not feel safe with your position on the team, knowing that your coach could cut you, or it's a lot more real life, and just having an athlete be able to open up to us, like support staff, strength and conditioning, whether it be athletic trainers, team nutritionists, stuff like that. I think that goes a long way, just having real conversations with them.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now, I just heard you mention, sleep and stuff, and the way that that can, help benefit athletes. And even earlier, we mentioned some things that you can do outside of the weight room and training facilities to kind of benefit your training. So, what roles do things like nutrition and sleep and recovery play in athletic performance? And how do you help your athletes stay on top of that?
It's up to the student athletes to execute on all those things, but it's up to us to educate them. So um, obviously we're the ones that have multiple degrees and all the certifications and stuff, like us nutritionists, athletic trainers and stuff like that. So we're the ones that need to provide that information for them and then just do our best to steer them in the right direction to act upon it. I think obviously nutrition is is one of the biggest differences between, if you look at like a pro athlete. Most of those pro athletes have a personal chef, have meals for them all the time. So, and that's really, performance nutrition is becoming such a bigger thing now. It's like you see all the Power 5 schools now have a full nutrition staff, because that's kind of where it's going. It started with trainers, now then strength conditioning, and now it's going sports science and nutrition. So I think that's definitely big, but it is up to us to educate them. And because at the end of the day, we might only see them 3 hours a week. So if we see them 3 hours a week and they have 24 hours in every single day, we they need to be doing their part as well. But it's up to us to educate them on that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And finally, I imagine it takes a team effort to support each athlete, of course.
Mhm.
So, how do you work with coaches, athletic trainers, and even mental health professionals to make sure athletes are developing in every area, not just physically?
I think again it goes back to communication. We're, especially in our department, we're so big on communication and making sure we have open communication, two-way communication with not only our student athletes, but like you said, all the other support staff. So nutritionists, trainers, mental health coaches, even the sport coaches too. Because if communication is broken at any point, usually that's when the student athlete suffers the most, or even the team suffers the most. So if we see, if we're seeing something in the weight room, like, oh, this person looks a little injured on this side, like we might have to refer them to a strength coach, or maybe like they seem very lethargic. Maybe they're not eating right. Like we might need to like bring the nutrition in on that. But we also have to do it at the athlete's discretion, and that's when I think like getting to know your student athletes is big, because it could just be how somebody's different personality. That's how they act. Like that's not really what's going on. But I think the more you get to know your student athletes, and the better communication you have amongst different support staff, I think that's what carries it, is because you kind of have the best feel for your student athletes on what they're feeling.
Coach Justin Kelly, we appreciate you. Thanks for hopping on here with us. This was absolutely incredible. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you for having me on.
That is our show for this week. Want to thank you guys for listening. You've been listening to Open Mic here on WJR.